Not long ago, Shoeonhead released a video about the male loneliness crisis to the algorithm's immense pleasure, and it bestowed upon us an extension of the cycle of discourse surrounding men's issues. Huzzah! It has spawned a number of reactions and breakdowns and tweets. A particularly excellent one being a video by FD Signifier, which you should watch because it touches on statistics, data, and how to read them. But on that note, a lot of people are really missing some important information on the subject of male loneliness, including Shoeonhead. And that's where I come in. Hi, I'm some guy. You can call me Chris, but I won't be able to hear you because in my current form, I only exist as the process of conversion between binary code and electrical impulses in the screen that you're addicted to. You're welcome. I'm also currently working on an unnecessarily high-effort project on the Mass Effect trilogy and the human condition, but it's taking a while, and now this happened, so I have to talk to you. I have to talk to you. Male loneliness. If you take one thing away from this video, please let it be this. When people tell you that the rate of unaliving is way higher among men, and then use that statistic as evidence to support the idea that there is a loneliness crisis that disproportionately affects men, they are wrong. Men do absolutely unalive themselves at a shockingly higher rate than women, but women make more attempts at it and experience more intrusive thoughts about it. This is not hard information to find. It's not that men are more depressed necessarily, it's that we're more successful at turning the lights off when we try to, which is, again, less often than women. The current hypothesis as to why more men unalive themselves despite thinking about it and attempting it less is based on pretty good data that suggests that we use more violent methods to do the deed. Please understand, this does not mean we shouldn't care about the high rate among men. We should. It's a really serious issue, but it's a small part of a larger statistical picture that shows us that everyone is struggling. I point this out to show that the conversation about loneliness and men is oftentimes broken from the start. For instance, we have loads of studies that show that across the board, women report experiencing loneliness at a much higher rate than men. Don't get me wrong, men are lonely, and men are getting lonelier, and men are experiencing loneliness in ways that are particular to us. And I definitely think we should care about those things. So it's very excellent to create some space to talk about male loneliness specifically, but do not get it twisted. There isn't much compelling evidence to suggest that there is a male loneliness crisis, so much as there is a general loneliness crisis that affects everyone in different ways. And for men, it affects us in a very male-gendered sort of way. And that cuts to the other end of the binary with women. I'm sure the NBs are involved as well. We're all sad together. Look, I can play devil's advocate with myself. I can do lots of things with myself. I mentioned before that women report more loneliness than men, but there are some caveats to that data. First off, we know that men are less likely to admit to feeling lonely than women because they face more stigma around having feelings that are perceived as weak. So male loneliness is likely underreported. Maybe men are a bit lonely than women, but we can't really say if that's the case, or if it is the case, if men are significantly more lonely to warrant it being labeled a male crisis specifically. We are all sad. The other caveat is that there is one demographic in which men are found to be definitively lonelier than women. According to a fairly recent study, single men experience loneliness far more than single women. And literally no one knows why for sure. One popular hypothesis is that women are bad and horrible, and feminism has led them astray, and they need to quit their jobs, marry young, and basically devote themselves to being bang maids, but with a low body count. Somehow, though, I doubt it. There is speculation that women are more likely to maintain friendships outside of romantic entanglements, so when women are single, they have more friends and, are less lonely. But that is just speculation. Literally, no one knows for sure. Also, the way that we define and test for loneliness does vary from study to study, and there is some debate about the accuracy and efficacy of certain criteria to define and test loneliness. But what we do know is that however we define and test for it, loneliness is rising, almost linearly, and has been since the 1970s. I'll say it again, it's affecting everyone in different ways. And we should talk about how it affects different people and groups, men included, but we should not frame it as a crisis that's specific and unique to men because it throws women under the bus. Just as it throws men under the bus to roll our eyes at men's struggle with basically enjoying consciousness, because that's what this is about. We are all having an increasingly hard time enjoying existence. That's the fucking crisis. Absent that understanding, you get a lot of jabronis who spend too much time opining that the left isn't talking to men enough. When, as FD Signifier points out in the aforementioned video, yes we are! It's the algorithm, dummy! Look, all I have to do is say woman bad and YouTube will functionally cream itself and send me to the moon and back. At least relative to the distance leftist takes on masculinity will take Take Me, which involves a lot of explaining about how feminism is the thing that actually fixes men's problems, not creates them. Despite that being true, it's a tough sell that isn't algorithmically enticing. I'd also like to point out that the criticism that the left isn't doing enough for men, interestingly enough, seems to be primarily coming from online leftists who have had really shall we say, spotty opinions about gender and race and feminism and pretty much anything that directly addresses the needs of marginalized people outside of class justice. Don't get me wrong, broken clocks are right twice a day, because of the class justice. But I just don't think this is one of those times. I mean, when I began my own navigation of the toxic elements that comprised my masculinity, it was feminists, not pickup artists or men's rights activists, but feminists who turned to me and said, hey, it must be really fucked up to be seen as inherently predatory because it erases your experience when you're victimized and it encourages you to perform an exhausting and inauthentic version of masculinity. Hey, it must be really shitty to be seen as someone who is inherently dangerous to and inept around children. Hey, it must be really shitty to feel like your manliness is tied to your body count. It got me reading Julia Serrano and Bell Hooks, and now I'm perfect. I make no mistakes ever. Point is, feminists and leftists have been talking to men with compassion about men's issues for a long time. And they still are. And it hasn't stopped. If it doesn't seem that way to you, then stop using the opinions and glossed over statistics of high-key, goofy, anti-SJW leftists to make qualitative judgments about how the left is doing right now. Fact is, we don't quite know how the left is doing right now if we're just looking at Twitter or YouTube or, God help me, TikTok. All of those things have algorithms that bury left-wing ideas while boosting right-wing ideas, which then make money for the owners of those platforms, thereby consolidating the power of a class of people who would rather set the world on fire and die a VIP than extinguish the flames and live in community along with the rest of us. A class of people who profit from the economic motive to create technologies and conditions that atomize and alienate us, thereby causing, say it with me, a steady increase in loneliness. A crisis, if you will. Maybe we should do something about that. About the ruinous people, making us all lonely and dead for money, starting with the marginalized and working their way on up. How could we ever solve this problem, you may ask? Well, you see, if women simply lowered their standards on dating apps, then we could...